Hello and welcome to the second episode of Beneath the Shadows. I am your host, Travis Fenn, recording today in the comfort of the Shadow Realm, my office studio located here in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I'd like to start off by saying thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for checking out the show, and thank you for taking the time to rate and review the show. The feedback is immensely helpful, and the positivity is always inspiring. If you like the show, please go and give it 5 stars, give it a rating, maybe a review, tell me something you like about it, something about yourself. If you don't like the show, go over there and give me 5 stars, and then, tell me what you don't like about it. But yeah, give me 5 stars either way. So, I'd like to take a moment to make some updates regarding the show and a few extra details about last week's episode. So, first off, quick spoiler, if you haven't heard last week's episode, but during the coroner's report, it was found that Tom Monfils was alive when he went into the pulp vat and died from asphyxiation or drowning on that paper pulp. This is a detail I kind of glossed over quickly and did not touch on again like I thought I would. Secondly, Tom's body was mutilated and the legs were decapitated below the knees near the ankles. This was due to the propeller at the bottom of the vat, not something that another person did to him. I'll do my best to not miss any details moving forward, and I will be trying to add more details than I did with my first episode. I was originally thinking of keeping these episodes to about half an hour, but after recording the first one, I may have to extend them out to 45 minutes to an hour. I'd love some feedback on that. What do you prefer? What is your ideal length for a podcast episode? Do you care if they vary some? What is your thoughts on that? Next up, I've got some social media pages up for the show, and I would love a follow and love to see who supports. This includes TikTok and Instagram, along with a Patreon page that I'm going to be hopefully releasing some shorter episodes or little tidbits on, 10 to 15 minute little episodes each week. We'll have to see. I'm not entirely sure on that one yet, but the name on those shows is Beneath the Shadows Podcast. That's TikTok, Instagram, and Gmail. And on Patreon, it is Beneath the Shadows. No podcast, but Beneath the Shadows. This includes a Gmail address with that same name. So if you'd like to send some email updates or topic suggestions, anything you'd like, whatever it may be, let me know. Now, with that little bit of housekeeping taken care of, with all these things tidied up, I'd like to say it's time we dive into today's episode. So today we will look at death row, inmates that have been executed, their crimes, and most importantly, their last meals, along with some extra interesting or odd details from commonly known killers like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer to lesser-known criminals such as Philip Workman. Now, let's grab our pentobarbital and our forks. Let's take these death row inmates and their last meals out of the shadows, and let's dive into today's topic. Also, just a little side note, I'm sorry if you hear any little jingle jangles. We just got a new puppy recently, and he's been running around a lot. It's either I shut the door and he cries, which really doesn't work, or I leave the door open and he is kind of moving about near the room. Like I said, I'm hoping to get better audio and get things set up where even if he's outside of the room like that, you won't be able to hear the little jingles and jangles, but for now, I apologize for the extra cue and little extra audio notes like those. We have 2 dogs and 4 cats, actually, so it gets a little crazy around here. With the puppy, it's even crazier than it has been. But that's it for today. I just wanted to include that little side note, and let's dive into today's episode. We will start today by talking about some random notes, random information about the death sentence and death row. Just a few things that I thought were interesting that I wanted to kind of highlight at the beginning of this episode. First, since 2000, the most people executed in 1 year was 85 in the year 2000, followed by 71 in the year 2002. Second, according to a 2021 Pew Research study, 60% of Americans support the death penalty for people convicted of murder. Next, alongside this, the Pew Research study also found that nearly 80% of Americans believe that there is some risk that an innocent person may be put to death. 27 states currently authorize the death penalty, though many of the states do not impose the death penalty and rather subside to life without parole. The Equal Justice Initiative states that 200 people have been exonerated and released from death row since 1973, so were wrongly convicted to start. And as of December 31st, 2022, Texas has executed a total of 578 people since the reinstatement of capital punishment in the United States in 1976. This is nearly 5 times as many as the number 2 state. Oklahoma would be that number 2 state with 119 executions carried out since 1976. And now, with that little bit of information thrown your way, let's dive into these, mainly serial killers. Let's dive into these criminals, these death row inmates, these dead motherfuckers, these very, very not alive people. Let's talk about them, their crimes, their last meals, and any other details that we can highlight here. So first off, we're going to talk about someone who is very popular, very well known. That is the killer clown, John Wayne Gacy himself. Born on March 17th, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois, John Wayne Gacy is a serial killer and sex offender who raped, tortured, and murdered at least 33 young men and boys in Norwood Park Township near Chicago, Illinois. He would bury a lot of these dead men, dead boys, mainly boys, I would say, usually under the age of 20. But he would bury a lot of them under his house, and that's obviously a very popular part of this case, the fact that his house had 30-something bodies in the crawl space underneath of it. John Wayne Gacy was at one point a happy man. He was married. He also managed a chain of KFC restaurants that were owned by his wife's family during the 1960s, and this was before his murder spree had started. After his murder spree started, John Wayne Gacy, like I said, would kill over 30 men and boys and would be found guilty of these murders and would be sentenced to death. He would die on May 10th, 1994 at the age of 52 at the Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Illinois. In Illinois, his whole life, he was a member of the JCs, did a lot in the community, kind of seemed like a normal guy, but was obviously a fucking monster. His last meal, let's talk about it. He had managed a KFC, and he loved it, apparently. He had a bucket of KFC for his last meal, along with French fries, a dozen fried shrimp, fresh strawberries, and a Diet Coke, because, gotta stay slim for your fucking death sentence, for your lethal injection. Gotta be slim for it, have to have the Diet Coke, can't get too riled up on caffeine with that regular Coca-Cola, those bastards. He's something else, and we're gonna move from him onto another popular person. Number 2, we have Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh, if you do not know, which I'm sure most of you do, was the perpetrator of the Oklahoma City bombing, and it killed 168 people, injuring over 800 people. It is and remains the largest, the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in the United States history. He was a Marine veteran, and he was very much influenced by the situation at Waco. He wanted to pretty much give the government what they had coming to him, and, I can't agree more. Just kidding. He's a terrible person as well. He's a horrible person. He was born April 23rd, 1968 in Lockport, New York, and he died June 11th, 2001 at the United States prison Terre Haute, I believe is how it's pronounced, in Terre Haute, Indiana. He, for his last meal, was a big old fat fuck, had 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream. At least, switch it up, have a pint of this and a pint of that. You're just gonna eat 2 pints of fucking mint chocolate chip ice cream? Asshole. So we'll move from Timothy McVeigh and his horrible crimes, his horrible doings, over to number 3, which is Ted Bundy, another very well-known person. He was born November 24th of 1946 in Burlington, Vermont. Ted Bundy was an American serial killer who kidnapped, raped, and murdered dozens of young women and girls during the 1970s. He is confirmed to at least have killed 20 different women. He has confessed to over 30 and is suspected of at least 36, if not more. Facing murder charges twice, though, Bundy escaped from authorities in 1977 and was not apprehended again until 1978 after he committed additional murders in Florida. He would be put to the death sentence in the state of Florida, where he died on January 24th of 1989 at the age of 42 at the Florida State Prison in Florida, obviously. Bundy declined a last special meal and was given the standard last meal of steak, eggs, hash browns, toast with butter and jelly, milk and juice, which honestly doesn't sound like the worst last meal in the world either. I don't know if he actually ate it, but he was given that for his last meal. We will now go to a very popular, very well-known female serial killer, Aileen Wuornos. Aileen was born February 29th of 1956 in the great state of Michigan here, my home state in Rochester, Michigan. Aileen Wuornos would work as a prostitute, and she would murder her Johns, the guys who hired her, for their cash and valuables. She would shoot them. She ended up robbing and killing 7 of her male clients. They were accused that they were trying to rape her. She was committing these crimes in self-defense, which was never proven, and it was more likely that she was just killing them for their cash and valuables. Aileen, decided not to have a last meal also, and only asked for a cup of coffee, which she was given. A little strange. I don't know why you want to just be hyped up on coffee for your lethal injection, but that's what she chose to do, so we're going to give that to her. Next up, number 5, we have Ricky Ray Rector. Ricky Ray Rector, triple R, motherfucker, was born January 12th of 1950 in the United States. I couldn't find the exact state, exact place. But in 1981, Ricky Ray Rector would murder police officer Robert Martin in Conway, Arkansas. He spent 3 days on the run before agreeing to turn himself in. Instead of giving himself up to the police officer, he shot another police officer. Actually, I don't know if that's right. I think that was, that was when he shot Robert Martin. However, instead of giving himself up, he shot Robert Martin, and then he shot himself in the head in a suicide attempt. He pretty much blew out his frontal lobe and pretty much effectively resulted in giving himself a lobotomy. But he did not die, and he was sentenced to death. He would die on January 24th of 1992 at the age of 42 in Cummins, Arkansas. My apologies. For his last meal, Ricky Ray Rector would ask for steak, fried chicken, cherry Kool-Aid, and pecan pie, however you pronounce it. He left the pecan pie and was telling guards that he was saving it for later. And he either thought he wasn't going to die or he was going to come back from the dead. So they thought that was interesting. It's definitely a main detail about his last meal request. Moving from Ricky Ray Rector, we will bounce over to another female murderer, and her name is Velma Barfield. She was also a serial killer, I guess you could say. Eventually confessed to 6 murders in total. She was the first woman in the United States to be executed after the 1976 resumption of capital punishment, and the first since 1962. She was also the first woman to be executed by lethal injection. She would act as a caretaker for elderly, older people and would kill them using arsenic. She was born on October 29th, 1932 in South Carolina and would die on November 2nd, 1984 at the age of 52 in Raleigh, North Carolina. For her last meal, Velma would ask for cheese doodles and a 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola. Unlike bitch-ass motherfucking John Wayne Gacy, he asked for his Diet Coke. None of that shit for Velma. Velma wanted that classic, good, crisp can of regular Coca-Cola. Give me the caffeine. Give me the sugar. Let me fucking die. Let's move on. Number 7, we have Victor Fugger? Feguer? Maybe. Feguer? Feguer? I don't know. He's a convicted murderer, the last federal inmate executed in the United States before the moratorium on the death penalty following Furman versus Georgia, as well as the last person put to death in the state of Iowa. He was also born in this motherfucking mitten state of Michigan. He was born on the west side of Michigan, though, in St. John's, Michigan, in 1935. He would die March 15th, 1963, at the age of only 28. Bastard. At the Iowa State Penitentiary in Fort Madison, Iowa. Iowa's governor and Victor's lawyer, attorney, asked John F. Kennedy for a commutation of Victor's death sentence, and John F. Kennedy said, "Fuck that," and denied that request, condemning Victor to his death. And Victor, for his last meal, would ask for a single olive with a pit left in it. He was hoping to pretty much eat, I think he left it in his pocket, actually. He left this single olive in his pocket and was hoping that when he was buried, that an olive tree would grow out of his remains or out of where he was buried. Which, I mean, it's kind of cool, I guess. I know you can do that nowadays. You can get your ashes put into a fucking planter thing that, comes back every year or whatever it is. So you're always around. You have this fucking plant that reminds you of this person because their ashes are fertilizing it or whatever the fuck it is. Kind of weird, but, everyone has their own thing that really works for them. So from number 7, move on to number 8. Stephen Wayne Anderson. A contract killer and serial killer who was executed at California's San Quentin prison by lethal injection in 2002 for the murder of Elizabeth Lyman. He was either known to have killed or admitted to the killings of at least 8 other people, including a fellow inmate, and at least 7 contract killings. Little backstory on him. On May 26th, 1980, Anderson, then 26th, burglarized the Bloomington, California house of 81-year-old Elizabeth Lyman. a retired piano teacher. In the middle of the night, Anderson cut Lyman's telephone line with a knife and broke into her home by removing a glass pane from her French doors. He checked the house for occupants, room by room, and when he entered Lyman's room, she awoke and screamed. Anderson shot her in the face, right in the fucking face, from close range with a .45 caliber handgun, fatally wounding her. If that did not fatally wound her, I would feel fucking horrid for her, getting shot in the face with a .45. He covered her blanket with a body. He covered her body with a blanket, recovered the expelled casing from the hollow point bullet, even worse, hollow point bullet that killed her, and ransacked her house for money. He found less than $100. Murdered this old, elderly, nice fucking lady in her own home for less than $100. He then proceeded to prepare himself a meal in Lyman's kitchen. A suspicious neighbor called the sheriff's department. As he was eating and watching television, sheriff's duties responded to the call and arrested him. Found him in the home eating fucking food and watching TV with a lady down the hall that he just shot in her fucking face. What a monster. What a terrible person. Happy that he is now dead. He was born July 8th, 1953 in Utah, and he would die January 29th of 2002 at San Quentin, like I had mentioned, in San Quentin, California. For his last meal, this motherfucker, this bitch-ass Stephen Wayne Anderson would have 2 grilled cheese sandwiches, a pint of cottage cheese, hominy corn mixture, peach pie, chocolate chip ice cream, and sliced radishes. Or radish, I'm guessing it's sliced. It just says radishes. Don't think he would just have whole radishes. But moving from there, we will go to number 9, which is Ronnie Lee Gardner. Ronnie Lee Gardner was born on January 16th of 1961 in Salt Lake City, Utah. Ronnie Lee received the death penalty for killing a man during an attempted escape from a courthouse in 1985 and was eventually executed by a firing squad in the state of Utah in 2010. His case spent nearly 25 years in the court system, prompting the Utah House of Representatives to introduce legislation to limit the number of appeals in capital cases. Ronnie Lee Gardner would ask for steak, lobster tail, apple pie, vanilla ice cream, and 7-Up as his last meal request. He also requested to watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy while he was eating, which I do believe was granted. Bitch ass, telling you. It was crazy because he chose the firing squad. I believe he may be the last person to have been killed by a firing squad in the United States. I don't think it's really a thing that happens much anymore. The only reason that an inmate would get shot now or be able to have the firing squad is if the lethal injection is not available or the drugs are not available for some reason, and he was able to choose one of the other options and chose the firing squad. Not a very common thing anymore, but 2010 was when Ronnie Lee Gardner was shot and killed during his firing squad death sentence. From Ronnie Lee, we will move down to, let's see, our next one. I think it's Angel. It might be Angel, but Angel Nieves Diaz, a man who was born in Puerto Rico, August 31st, 1951 in Puerto Rico. A Puerto Rican convict and a suspected serial killer who was executed by lethal injection in Florida. Nieves, who had escaped from a prison in Puerto Rico while serving time for murder, was convicted of shooting and killing the manager of a strip club in Florida in 1979. He maintained his innocence until his death, and let me tell you, what a fucking death it was. Some consider his injection, his execution, to be the worst botched execution in the United States history. It took Diaz over half an hour. I believe it was 34 minutes exactly to die. This was a terrible result of a combination of drugs that were not working on him. Here's a little excerpt from the sun.uco.uk. Soon, his strapped-down body began to shudder as he grasped for air, and his skin started to turn black from chemical burns. 10 minutes on, when he should have been dead, he managed to whisper, "What is going on?" Watching the traumatic and gruesome spectacle were witnesses, including journals, prison staff, and a chaplain. By the 24th minute, 24 fucking minutes of just being injected with chemicals trying to kill your fucking ass, by the 24th minute, his body suddenly jolted and his eyes opened widely, sparking panic in the death chamber in Florida State Prison. Diaz had always maintained his innocence after being convicted in 1986 of murdering a manager of a strip club in 1979. After spending 20 years languishing on death row, the 55-year-old was hauled into the execution room of Florida State Prison in Ryford, where he was given his last statement. It said, "The state of Florida is killing an innocent person. The state of Florida is committing a crime because I am innocent. The death penalty is not a form of vengeance, but also a cowardly act by humans." Diaz was then strapped down on a bed called a gurney, where 3 drugs were pumped into his body. One was intended to dull his pain, a second to paralyze his body, and a third to stop his heart in what was claimed to be a painless and humane execution. By the 34th minute, a doctor who was wearing a mask rushed in and checked the inmate's vital signs. But it was another 2 minutes before he was pronounced dead, more than 3 times longer than it should have been. He had, terrible burns all over his arms. You can actually see pictures where skin is starting to peel off of his arms because it is burned. It was horrific, and even for his crimes, even if he did murder someone in Puerto Rico and murdered the manager of the Miami strip club, I don't know if he was deserving of a death that took 34 minutes. That's straight up torture, straight up fucking awful. That's crazy. Crazy talk, and it needs to never happen again. Definitely something that I'm sure has been worked on since it has happened, but is awful that it had to happen in the first place. Angel Diaz would die on December 13th of 2006 at the age of 55 at the Florida State Prison in Florida, and he declined a last meal request. Again, another person, but was served a regular prison meal, which he did not eat, so he fasted before his execution. From Angel Diaz, we will go to Philip Workman. Philip Workman was convicted in 1982 for the murder of a police officer following a robbery of a Wendy's restaurant in Memphis, Tennessee, and sentenced to death by lethal injection. Philip was born June 1st, 1953 at Fort Campbell and would die on May 9th, 2007 at the age of 53 in Tennessee. Workman had no last meal request, but he did have something special that he wanted to do, which I will go over in a minute. Other than that, though, I wanted to say there are 5 jurors in Workman's case who convicted Workman in 1982, who have since signed affidavits renouncing either the sentence or the verdict or both. Wardy Parks, a member of the 1982 jury, has stated that if the new evidence I reviewed had been present at the time of Workman's trial, I would have had a reasonable doubt whether Workman was guilty. Workman, for his last meal request, did not actually request food for himself, but asked that a large vegetarian pizza be given to a homeless person in Tennessee. The prison denied this request because they're a bunch of fucks. It's one pizza, and they couldn't even do that shit just because it wasn't for him. And Workman decided to refuse to eat anything due to this denial. But on May 9th, 2007, as Philip Workman was dying, homeless shelters across Tennessee received massive numbers of pizzas, with various toppings from all over the country, honoring Workman's last meal request. Philip Workman was trying to do a good deed and no one would help him, said one woman who, together with friends, donated $1,200 worth of pizzas to Nashville's rescue mission. PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, President Ingrid Newkirk, donated 15 vegetarian pizzas, commenting that Workman's act was selfless and kindness to all living beings is a virtue. Marvin Champion, an employee of Nashville's rescue mission, remarked, "I used to be homeless, so I know how rough it can get. I've seen some bad times, not having enough food, the cupboards are bare, but now we've got enough pizza to feed people for quite a while." From Philip and his selfless act, selfless request, we will go to probably the most heinous, despicable, disgusting motherfucker we'll talk about today, and this is Lawrence Russell Brewer. Lawrence Russell Brewer was born on March 13th of 1967, and he would die September 21st of 2011 at the age of 44. Lawrence Russell Brewer was convicted of a hate crime murder of James Byrd Jr. alongside two other men. On June 7th, 1998, James Byrd Jr., age 49, accepted a ride from Sean Berry, Lawrence Brewer, and John King. Berry, who was driving, was acquainted with Byrd from around the town. Instead of taking Byrd home, the three men took Byrd to a remote county road, out of town, and maliciously killed him. The details are incredibly graphic and gory. And this cocksucker had the craziest fucking last meal request I've ever seen in my life. I don't know why would they even grant this? I have no fucking clue. No one would ever eat all this fucking food, and Texas is a bunch of stupid ass motherfuckers for granting this. And we'll talk about the aftermath too, because shit came out of this afterwards. For his last meal request, Lawrence Russell Brewer would ask for 2 chied frickin' steaks, chicken fried steaks, a triple meat bacon cheeseburger, a cheese omelet with ground beef, tomatoes, onions, bell peppers, jalapenos, a large bowl of fried okra with ketchup, 1 pound of barbecued meat with half a loaf of white bread, 3 fajitas, a meat lover's pizza, 1 pint of Blue Bell vanilla ice cream, and a slab of peanut butter fudge with crushed peanuts. Brewer's last meal was so extravagant, and he did not eat a single fucking bite of it. He told officials that he was not hungry when they delivered the meal to him, and for that, the aftermath, Texas abolished the last meal tradition after his execution, and now serves a standard last meal to all death row inmates on their last day. Next up, we will talk about John Allen Muhammad. John Allen Muhammad, alongside Lee Boy Malvo, would be the DC snipers. They would go on, goodness gracious, I can't even remember the amount of people that they killed, but would kill quite a few people. In 1999, though, Williams, at the time his name was Williams, John Allen Williams, kidnapped his children and took them to Antigua, apparently engaging in credit card and immigration document fraud. It was during this time that he became close with Lee Boyd Malvo, a Jamaican child who later acted as his partner in the killings. Born on December 31st, New Year's Eve of 1960, John Allen Muhammad would die on November 10th of 2009, and for his last meal, request something pretty simple: chicken with red sauce and several cakes. And I don't know if they mean like birthday fucking cakes or like potato cakes or fucking what kind of cake. They didn't actually specify, but several cakes. From the DC sniper, we will go to William Bonin, the freeway killer, a serial killer and sex offender who raped, tortured, and murdered young boys and men between November 1968 and June of 1980 in Southern California. He was convicted of 14 murders, but he had confessed to 21 and is suspected of even more than that. His first known murder victim was killed in May of 1979. Bonin generally operated by luring his victims into his van under the pretense of having consensual sex. He became known as the Freeway Killer because most of his victims' bodies were discovered beside the freeway. For his last meal, William Bonin would request 2 pepperoni and sausage pizzas, 3 servings of chocolate ice cream, and 3 six-packs of Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Going hard on the caffeine, the fucking big sugar. He is just cramming it in there. That's so much soda. So from William Bonin, we will go next to our friend over in Germany, Peter Kürten. Peter Kürten would commit a series of murders and sexual assaults between February and November of 1929 in the city of Dusseldorf. In the years before these assaults and murders, Kürten had amassed a lengthy criminal record for offenses including arson and attempted murder. Kürten became known as the Vampire of Dusseldorf because he occasionally made attempts to drink the blood from his victims' wounds, and the Dusseldorf Monster, both because the majority of his murders were committed in and around the city of Dusseldorf, but also because the savagery he would inflict upon his victims' bodies. Peter Kürten was born on May 26th of 1883 in Cologne, Germany, and would die in the same city in Germany on July 2nd of 1931 at the age of 48. For his last meal, Peter Kürten would ask for Wiener Schnitzel, fried potatoes, and a bottle of white wine, which was granted. Germany letting you get fucked up before your execution. Hopefully you drink that whole bottle fast to feel it. We will move then on from that little motherfucker, little German bastard, to John David Doody. John David Doody, born on April 25th of 1952 in Oklahoma, would be executed in Oklahoma for first-degree murder. According to the Oklahoma Department of Corrections, he was the first person in the United States to have been put to death with pentobarbital. Pentobarbital is regularly used to euthanize animals. A nationwide shortage of sodium thiopental led to the state to incorporate the substitution into the protocol for the lethal injections. Doody was sentenced to death for strangling a fellow inmate at Oklahoma State Penitentiary in December of 2001. At the time, he had already been serving a life sentence for a 1978 conviction of rape, robbery, and shooting with intent to kill. He did not contest the murder charge and vowed that he would kill again if he was not executed. John David Doody, this bastard, was... didn't have a crazy last meal request, went with something kind of simple, pretty cheap. He requested a double cheeseburger with mayonnaise, a foot-long chili cheese coney, a cherry limeade, and a large banana shake from Sonic. I'm sure you could have got pretty much all of that shit from Sonic. Cheap and easy going, fat shit, went to his death, died on December 16th of 2010 at the age of 58, at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma. Next up from there, we'll go to one cold motherfucker. Not really, but his last meal request is kind of funny. David Edwin Mason. David Edwin Mason was born on December 2nd of 1956 in Statesboro, Georgia. David Edwin Mason, a serial killer who killed at least 4 elderly people between March and December of 1980 in Oakland, California, and his cellmate in 1982, along with possibly another male who may have been his lover. For these crimes, he was sentenced to death and executed at San Quentin State Prison in 1993, the last inmate to have been executed in this manner in the state of California. He was also the first condemned inmate since the reinstatement of the death penalty to voluntarily withdraw all of his appeals. He would die on August 24th, 1993, at the age of 36 in San Quentin, California. David Edwin Mason, for his last meal request, only wanted a glass of ice water. Like I said, a cold motherfucker. We're gonna pop over now from David Edwin Mason to Thomas J. Grosso. Thomas J. Grosso was born November 23rd, 1962 in West Babylon, New York. Convicted murderer who was executed by the state of Oklahoma for the murder of 87-year-old Hilda Johnson, whom he strangled in Tulsa in December of 1990. He also murdered 81-year-old Leslie Holtz in New York in July of 1991. He has become posthumously known for his last words regarding his last meal request. His last meal request: 2 dozen steamed mussels, 2 dozen steamed clams, a double cheeseburger from Burger King, half a dozen barbecued spare ribs, 2 strawberry milkshakes, half a pumpkin pie with whipped cream and diced strawberries. He also requested SpaghettiOs, and they gave this motherfucker spaghetti. They went better than SpaghettiOs, but in his last words regarding his last meal, Thomas J. Grosso would say, "I did not get my SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this." Pissed. He was pissed they did not get his SpaghettiOs and got spaghetti instead. Which, I mean, hey, I love SpaghettiOs. SpaghettiOs with meatballs? Fucking throw that shit in front of me. Heat it up in the microwave. Very nostalgic. Very nostalgic for me. This motherfucker, Thomas J. Grosso, would die March 20th of 1995 at the age of 32 in McAlester, Oklahoma. We only have a couple of more. Next, we will bounce to Robert Buell. Buell, I believe it's Buell. He was a child murderer, serial rapist, suspected serial killer, and former planning department worker from Akron, Ohio. This case was presented as material evidence in Forensic Files, Season 5, Episode 8, made 2 years before Buell's execution. If you want to go and kind of see what it's about, that episode has some details. I only put him on here because I found it interesting that he also requested a single black unpitted olive for his last meal. More than one motherfucker has requested a single olive that was unpitted for their last meal. I wonder if he also, like Victor up above, wanted to have an olive tree grow from his ashes or grow from his remains. Robert Buell was born on September 10th of 1940 in Norwood, Ohio, and would die September 25th, 2002, age 62 in Lucasville, Ohio. From Robert, we will move on to, I think it's Dobie, it might be Dobie, D-O-B-I-E, Gillis Williams. Dobie was born 1961, a criminal in Louisiana who was convicted of the murder of Sonia Nippers in 1984 and sentenced to death. He was executed in 1999. His case has been quite controversial. Williams' execution was twice stayed, and his sentence was overturned by a federal district court judge. But Williams was executed because the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that mitigating information was introduced to the jury too late in his case. It ruled that the execution had to proceed under the 1996 Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, the AEDPA. So even with mitigating information coming in, they ruled to kill this motherfucker. And a lot of people that hasn't sat very well with. Dobie would end up dying January 8th of 1999 at the age of 38 in Louisiana. For his last meal request, I don't even think I'd be able to eat this. 12 candy bars and some ice cream. Some ice cream, like, I wonder how much ice cream. 12 candy bars, though. What kind of candy bars? I like a Snickers. I mean, I'll throw down a couple of Snickers at least, but 12 of those bitches? And were they regular size candy bars, or is he going king size, or are they just giving him, like, here's 12 fucking fun size candy bars? It doesn't really specify, but 12 candy bars, just thinking about that is, I'd be fucking puking. Too much sugar, that's for sure. Last, but not least at all, we'll go back to someone who is very well known, and that someone is Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, an American serial killer and sex offender who killed and dismembered 17 males between 1978 and 1991, was born May 21st, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he would die November 28th, 1994 at the age of 34 at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. Dahmer, I just found this funny, so I had to include it. This is the way it was said in this article that I was reading. Dahmer was killed in prison before he could be executed, so he did not have a traditional last meal. No shit. But he was stabbed to death in prison, and that's better for everyone. I'm okay with that. He was going to die one way or the other, and sooner the better, so, because he was a monster. Terrible monster motherfucking person. And with that, now that we are full of food and full of bullshit spewed by these monstrous people, let's head over to this week's main marks. First off, number one, today we had KFC with a killer clown, John Wayne Gacy, and a cup of coffee with a murderous prostitute, Aileen Wuornos. Number two, we learned that more than one inmate on death row has requested a single olive with the pit as their last meal of choice. Number three, Philip Workman had his last meal request of give a large pizza to a homeless person denied, only to be supported by numerous donations from across the country that bought hundreds of pizzas for homeless shelters in Tennessee. Number four, piece of shit. Lawrence Russell Brewer not only committed an incredibly heinous hate crime, but also ruined last meal requests for inmates in Texas as a whole. As mentioned, Texas decided to dispose of the last meal requests after Brewer's absurd request and subsequent denial to eat it. Number five, some additional information. As of October 1st, 2020, 2,557 inmates were under sentence of death in the United States. There are 5 methods of execution in the United States, lethal injection being the most common, electrocution, lethal gas, hanging, and firing squad. I don't believe any of the last 3 are used much at all anymore. Maybe lethal gas, but definitely not hanging and the firing squad. But with that, I'm ready to get out of today's topic and on to our final takeaway. Thank you for joining me on this wild, demonic, and munchie-filled episode of Beneath the Shadows. So many criminals, so much crime, so much death, and so much tasty food today. Yum! Delicious, I'll tell you what, I can't get enough of it. Could always eat extra food, always have extra coffee. I need my caffeine. Love to feel stimulated. Alright, that's with that out of the way, remember to check out social media, Instagram and TikTok, along with Patreon. Please rate and review if you like the show at all. Give me 5 stars, tell me something that you liked about it, tell me something that you like in general. And like I said at the top, if you hate it, give me 5 stars and tell me why you hated it. I hope that works, yeah. And yeah, maybe let me know what you would choose as your last meal if you were a horrible murderer on death row, something like that. You can also email the show, about the show, information about yourself with updates or topic suggestions to beneaththeshadows@gmail.com. Thank you for doing that. And next week, we will look at an inspirational story of monumental proportion. What would you do if your life were faced with extreme adversity as a child? Well, for one child named Donnie Priest, He chose to thrive and live his life to the fullest. Now, at 52 years old, we will look into how Donnie Priest went, against all odds, from the lone survivor of a horrific crash to becoming a board-certified prosthesist orthotist. Jesus. Buckle up. Buckle up. It's an incredible tale that I'm very excited to share with you. Can't talk. Let's try that one again. Buckle up. It's an incredible tale that I'm very excited to share with you all. There we go. Thank you again for joining me today. This has been Beneath the Shadows. I am your host, Travis Fenn. And all of you shadow people, have a great day. Bow, bow, bow. Bow, bow.